Please welcome producer Stephanie Toby.
Hi, thank you all so much for coming. And thank you, Stony Brook Film Festival, for having Abducted in Plain Sight. We feel so honored to be here. I'll just talk a little bit about how I found this story, and then we can open it up for questions. So I found this story by reading the book, Stolen Innocence. I was working an office job, answering phone calls, and obsessing over whatever true crime story was on the news that day. And the woman I worked for was like, if you like true crime, the woman who had this position before you wrote a book about her life story. And I read it in one day. I felt like I was reading her to safety, and I couldn't leave her on page, you know, in the middle of the book, because she was still kidnapped and brainwashed, and so I read it in one day. And over the next year, I ran into Jan a couple times. We talked about her story, cried together, and it wasn't until the 3 girls got found after being kidnapped for 10 years in Cleveland, Ohio. When that happened, I called Jan. I just said, I want to volunteer somewhere, I want to do something, I want to shed light on this topic, what should I do? And she said, why don't you tell my story? So this is my first documentary that I've produced. I surrounded myself with brilliant women who knew what they were doing. The director, Skye Borgman, is a cinematographer for documentaries. This is her second one that she directed. She was brilliant and amazing to work with and learn from. And then our other producer, Emily Kincaid, came on about halfway through, helped us produce the reenactments, and was also just a force to work with. So it was a great experience. We could do questions?
So this is the Q&A portion. As always, you can tweet your questions to hashtag SBFF. I'll tell you a true story. Alan watched this film first. When he gave it to me, he said, halfway through the film, I Googled it to see if it was true. So go watch it. I went and watched it, even though Alan told me that. Halfway through the film, I Googled it to see if it was true. When it was screened here, our projectionist went back and Googled it to see if it was true. It's true. Do we have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So if you couldn't hear, the question is about Jan's relationship with the mother and the fact that at certain points during the documentary, it's very aggravating to hear how the mother was talking about the relationship.
Yeah. So creating this documentary, during the interviews, we really wanted to have the family members go back to the 1970s, before they knew what they knew about Robert Berchtold, and try to talk about him without knowing what a monster he was. So we did a lot of work to try to get them back to that place. Like, what were the first impressions of him? What did you like about him? What were some good characteristics? Just to have them try to remember, because they've been talking about him with such negativity that we couldn't get them back to those memories, how they first felt. So we had to do a lot of work with them for that, to remember the good times and their first impressions, to really show how they were manipulated by him. And as far as the family goes, they are still one strong family unit. Married, they live, Jan lives with her parents next door to her little sister, Susan. There was a period of time in Jan's life where she was really angry at her family. It was a very brief point. I've been angry at my mother for smaller things for longer. So it did shock me how well they were able to rally together as a family. And I think for them, they all were able to see that there was one clear bad guy, and they were the victims because this one man came into their life. They haven't faltered since then. Neither parent has had any indiscretions, and so it was this man that manipulated them. Also, their religion is very big on forgiveness, and so I think that saved them. It's also what got them into this mess in the first place, but it definitely is what saved them and kept them as a family. And yes, as filmmakers, we did get angry at the parents many times, but it's also, this is their life, this is what happened, and they're beautiful, lovely, flawed individuals, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so the question was if we tried to reach out to Gail Birchtold. Facebook has been an incredible tool in finding people. You can pretty much find anybody that you're looking for. So yes, we reached out to Gail Birchtold. We reached out to all 5 children. Unfortunately, they did not want to talk to us or have anything to do with it. They all still are together. Joe Birchtold told us that they all are together in a great, loving family. So, but no, unfortunately, we did not get to talk to her.
Yes, ma'am, right here. Right, so are you indicating that his family was manipulated by him as well? Right.
Yeah, so we did talk to a forensic psychologist to kind of review the case now and see. She was very great letting us know kind of where the world was in the 1970s. And unfortunately, like the FBI agent says, they just weren't aware yet of what a pedophile was. Stockholm Syndrome was just starting to come into the news. You know, unfortunately, even today, these are still the hardest crimes to prosecute people on. So we still have an issue with it today.
Yes, ma'am. Right, so the question is, did one person do all the interviews, or because of the vulnerability, I can never say that word, because of how open the people being interviewed were, how was that handled?
So I think the reason that we were able to get them to make such great confessions was that 3 women went into the house. We gained the trust of Jan very early on. She and I spent many hours together. But before we interviewed the parents, we went out to dinner with them. We went home, we baked cookies, we did dishes, we played music, and I played board games with their grandchildren, and we just had a beautiful time getting to know them. These interviews were grueling. They were 8 hours long. Jan, we ended up interviewing 4 times. Pete Welsh, we interviewed for 3 days straight, 8 hours long. Same with Marianne and Bob. So they were really grueling, emotional interviews. And I think Skye talks about, you know, just when somebody has a camera on you, and we weren't interrupting them. You know, we would ask questions and try to get them back on topic, but it was them talking without interruption about their story. And I think there's something magical about that.
Yes, ma'am. Right.
So, sorry. No, you go. Sorry.
Okay. So the question is about whether Birchtold's brother, who we see being interviewed, expressed any guilt for not coming forward sooner with information.
That was a really interesting interview, one that I was terrified to do. I sent a message to my boyfriend, like, if you don't hear from me in 2 hours, like, call the FBI. This is where we are. We're not going to make it out. The reason he agreed to talk to us was because he really wanted to tell Birchtold's side of the story. And Birchtold's side of the story was that the parents traded sexual favors with him for access to Jan. And Joe Birchtold, the brother, believed this to be true. He also believed in the same breath that his brother was a pedophile. He would leave his stepdaughter alone with Birchtold and not even think about it. So I don't know. It went back and forth. There were times where he realized his brother was doing something illegal, but at the same time would leave his own children with him. So I don't know. I think he loved his brother, and I think he thought the Brobergs were lying about the whole thing.
Was he ever asked about Berchtold's claims about being abused as a child?
Yes, we did ask him, and he confirmed that he was also abused by his aunt as well. They are stepbrothers with the same mom, and their dads are brothers. And Joe's dad did not believe that Bob Berchtold should be part of their family and was really mean to him and all that stuff, so true.
Yes, back there. So the question is, was Jan or the parents did they go through therapy? At the time that this was happening, or since then?
Yes, so after the first kidnapping, Jan was ordered to go to a therapist, which she did go to, and unfortunately did not give up any information. And then after the second kidnapping, she did have some therapy, but it wasn't until she was in her late 20s that she started doing therapy. And what she does is the landmark theorem, if anyone's heard of that. Group therapy, kind of Tony Robbins on steroids. The parents have not received any therapy. So yeah, it's no. Yes and no.
Sir, you had a question there. Yes, you. Yeah. Oh, was the therapy through their faith, or was it more medical therapy? If you know.
You know, I'm not quite 100% sure about that. I know the court-ordered therapy was not through religion, and the landmark is not their religion either.
Okay, I've tried to call on the same guy 3 times now. The woman, okay, whoever. So the question is Jan in a relationship with somebody at this time?
So Jan has been married 4 times. She really wants to find a great love. Unfortunately, she hasn't had very great luck in that department. She ends up falling in love really fast, getting married really fast. Most of her marriages have had abuse of some sort and have ended pretty quickly. She has 1 son from her first marriage, and she has 3 stepdaughters from her 3rd marriage that are beautiful and loving in her life.
Yes, ma'am. Can you say that a little louder? I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. So the question was, who was photographing it from the beginning? So we do have a lot of family videos in there and family photos. But what we did was we got an 8mm camera and we shot recreations. So we hired actors and had them recreate the scenes. We did that because we wanted it to look like family videos. So the fact that you thought it was all real is, you know, a little pat on our backs. So that's what we did. We also did it because we didn't have a huge budget, and 8mm film can hide a lot of seams. We basically just taped up walling, wallpaper, and shot those. So that's why. The phone calls are all real. The recordings with Jan and B about her dream in the water, that is real. The letters are real. Yeah, Pete Welsh, the FBI agent, ended up saving thousands of FBI investigative information from this case. So that is how we have all of this stuff. This case shaped his career. He became a profiler for the FBI, went to Quantico, taught people how to profile. So that's how we have all this information.
We have time for just a few more questions. Yes, ma'am, right there. Are there other documentaries on the horizon? That's your question?
We don't.
Right.
Not well. I don't yet. I'm trying to turn this into a limited scripted series. But after talking to some of you at the bar last night, there are some true crimes that have happened right here that I might that I might want to do. Skye Borgman, the director, she is working on another true crime documentary, developing that at the moment. But we'll see.
And yes, sir. Yep. So the question is, are there any thoughts that the parents were somehow complicit in, maybe even unintentionally complicit? Yes.
No, that's okay. You know, the parents made a lot of mistakes over and over and over again. Intentionally, I don't believe that they would ever put their daughter in harm's way. We don't have any evidence that shows that they intentionally did that. I do think that this man was a master manipulator. They happened to have a daughter that was the age that he liked, and they had 2 more that were going to be there in a couple of years. I think he had a great way of finding out what each person needed and was able to fill that gap for them. So I don't think that they were complicit. I do think that they made a lot of mistakes, and unfortunately, their daughter was harmed. I think the police made a lot of mistakes. I think the court system made a lot of mistakes. I think everybody failed this little girl. The community did too. There were a lot of police reports where people knew that there was abuse happening, but they didn't go to the police. They went to their church or their friends. So I think everybody failed this little girl.
Please thank Stephanie Tobey.
Thank you so much. I'll be up there if you guys have any more questions.